one thing that's come up about Texas several times in my work in the past has been missing and exploited Indigenous women and human sexual trafficking on the border and that kind of thing. Are you familiar with that issue, and have you been approached by any of the, the nonprofits or there's small things trying to get more attention? Because a lot of times you'll see things like the Gabby Petito case, which, it was a horrendous case. Glad it got publicity, but there are a lot of Indigenous women who are missing, and the cases don't get any publicity at all. So could you give me some thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. And I actually went to a demonstration earlier this month. And I carried a red dress in remembrance of missing murdered Indigenous women, to bring eyes to the issue, that our women are being taken and they're being abused, and many of them are being murdered. And, a lot of it, and it's not just near reservations, it's all over. It's a systemic issue. A lot of people in Texas are, they would identify as Indigenous, even though they may or may not be detribalized. Like they still have those cultural aspects and have grown up with those teachings. So it is something we talk about a lot within our communities, and it does bring a distrust of police and a distrust of the criminal justice system, because they're obviously failing a lot of people, and we do, as a medical worker, we've had to have training on traffic victims, because we have an obligation medically, if they're in our care, to prevent violence for them. And so a lot of people have had to have the training about what kind of signs to look for, and how can you offer help to these people. And again, even with all of the education, we're still not helping everybody. That's still a problem. And I think we have Amber Alerts like at least several times a week, where I live, and it's often children.
I can't remember the last Amber Alert. I live on the West Coast. Like I can't, like if it was a few months ago. Tell me more about that. What every week you have an Amber Alert almost?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Often, again, with like domestic violence, I'm not, it could be related. Often, most of the time they find them, right? Like, oh, it was a relative. They had a dispute. Somebody took custody without talking about it. But some of them are actually not found. And we have a lot of missing kids too, in the state. And, there's a lot of kids living under the poverty line, which makes them more susceptible to being trafficked or victims of that. So it is I would consider that also a human rights crisis that we're dealing with.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, you've taught me a lot about that area. I had heard some things, particularly about the human sexual trafficking. And on the West Coast, it's they call it the I-5 corridor, the same problem near Los Angeles, and California, and then also up north to Seattle. There's another human trafficking corridor, human sexual trafficking. And Eliza Blue actually does a lot of really good advocacy work, trying to get awareness out. A lot of the nonprofits, unfortunately, I've been disappointed in. They end up just kind of swallowing the profits and not really doing their jobs.